Nobody tells you that grief has a guest list. Jennifer died on a Tuesday. Pancreatic cancer. 6 weeks from diagnosis to burial, which is the cruelest kind of fast. Not enough time to say everything you need to say. Too much time to watch someone you love turn into a version of themselves you barely recognize. She was 53. She still had a Pinterest board called "When We Finally Go to Italy." We never went to Italy. I'm telling you this so you understand what kind of hole I was left standing next to. Not a hole in my schedule. Not a hole in my social calendar. A hole in the center of everything. Jennifer and I had been married 26 years. She laughed at my terrible jokes. She left her socks on the bathroom floor. And somehow that never annoyed me once. She made coffee too strong and said you're welcome to the microwave when it beeped. She was the whole architecture of my ordinary life. And when she died, the building stayed standing. The walls, the roof, the furniture. But none of it meant a single thing. What I didn't expect, what no grief counselor and no well-meaning pastor and no sympathy card with a watercolor sunset prepared me for, was what my family would do next. Which was nothing. Absolutely, spectacularly, historically nothing. Welcome back to Dad's Sweet Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, every villain in these stories thought they were the smartest person in the room. They were not. Subscribe so you never miss a story. I should give you the cast, because this story has one, and they all have names. Hannah is my older sister, 61 years old, lives 40 minutes away in the same suburb she's lived in since 1994, and has strong opinions about the correct way to load a dishwasher. Rachel is my younger sister, 55, 2 hours away, very busy, always just about to call. Brooke is my daughter, 28 when Jennifer died, lives 45 minutes away with her husband Morgan and their 2 kids. Austin is my son, 26, single, lives in the same city as me, literally 12 minutes from my front door. That's the family. 4 people within reasonable driving distance. 2 of them my own children. Jennifer died, and they showed up for the funeral. There's free food and a socially acceptable reason to cry, so the attendance rate is generally solid. They wore black. They hugged me. Hannah said, "James, if you need anything, anything at all, you call us." I nodded. I believed her. I didn't know yet that anything at all had a very narrow definition. The first month, I cooked. This is what I did with the grief. I cooked. Jennifer had been the cook in our house for 26 years, and in her absence I discovered that I was actually decent at it, and that standing over a stove with something that needed my attention was the closest thing to peace I could find. So I made pot roast and lasagna, and those stuffed bell peppers Jennifer used to make, and I packaged everything into containers, and I invited people over. I called Hannah. I made pot roast. Come Sunday. She came. Morgan and Brooke came. Rachel even drove up, which felt like a gesture. Austin showed up 20 minutes late with a 6-pack and ate 3 plates and said, "Dad, this is actually incredible." That first Sunday, the house was full. Noisy, kids running around. Hannah and Rachel arguing about something that happened in 1987. Brooke showing me pictures on her phone of the grandkids doing something with a sprinkler. Morgan loading the dishwasher the wrong way, according to Hannah. I stood in Jennifer's kitchen, in Jennifer's house, surrounded by people, and I thought, okay, we're going to be okay. I did not know yet how badly I was misreading the room. The Sundays continued. I kept cooking. I kept calling. And slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice it, they stopped coming. Not all at once. That would have been too obvious, too easy to name. Instead, it was a fade, a gradual dimming. Hannah came to maybe 6 Sundays before she started having conflicts. Rachel's drives became less frequent, then rare, then stopped. Brooke and Morgan were so busy. The kids, the schedules, the things that fill up a young family's life until there's no room left for an old man with a pot roast. Austin was the one that got me. Austin lived 12 minutes away. 12 minutes. I know because I drove it once, just to confirm, just to make sure I wasn't being unreasonable. 12 minutes, no traffic. He stopped coming after about 3 months. I called him one Sunday in November. Jennifer had been gone about 4 months, and he let it go to voicemail. I left a message. "Hey, it's Dad. Made chili. Enough for an army. Come by if you want." He texted back 2 hours later. "Can't tonight, sorry. Rain check." The rain check never got collected. I want to be very precise about the timeline here, because I think it matters. I am not describing a situation where years had passed, and grief had faded, and people had reasonably moved on with their lives. I am describing the first year after my wife of 26 years died. The first year, when the sympathy cards were still in a pile on the kitchen counter, when I was still accidentally buying two of things at the grocery store. That first year, my family called me a combined total of, and I counted, because apparently I became the kind of man who counts these things. 11 times, 11 calls, in 12 months. Between 4 people, Hannah called 3 times, Rachel called twice, Brooke called 4 times, but 2 of those were accidentally on speakerphone, and she clearly hadn't meant to call me. Austin called twice, and one of those was to ask if I still had his camping gear from 2019. I am not exaggerating. I kept a note in my phone. I don't know why I kept it. Maybe because some part of me suspected that one day I would need the receipts. Year 2. I kept cooking. I kept calling. I want you to understand this because it's important. I did not go quietly into the dark. I was not a passive participant in my own abandonment. I called. I invited. I drove to Brooke's house twice without being invited. Just to see the grandkids. Just to have something to do on a Saturday afternoon. One time I sat in the driveway for 10 minutes before going up, because I was embarrassed, me, in my 60s, embarrassed to knock on my own daughter's door. And when Brooke opened it, she looked surprised in a way that said, "I forgot you existed for a minute there." "Dad, we were just heading out," she said. They weren't heading out. I could see Morgan in the living room in sweatpants with the remote control. "Oh, that's fine," I said. "I was just in the neighborhood. I lived 45 minutes away. I drove home and sat in Jennifer's kitchen. My kitchen, I kept calling it Jennifer's kitchen. Old habits. And I ate pot roast alone and watched a show I didn't care about and went to bed at 9 o'clock. Year 2 became year 3. Year 3 became year 4. And still I cooked. Still I called. I became, if I'm being brutally honest about it, a man who was waiting for his family to remember he existed. Every holiday I set a table for more people than came. Every birthday I made calls that went to voicemail. Every Sunday I made food that I eventually started putting in the freezer, because there was too much of it for one person. My freezer became a museum of unanswered invitations. I had a therapist during this period, a woman named Dr. Calloway, not a family name, just my therapist, who told me I needed to set boundaries and communicate my needs clearly. I invite them every week, I told her. I call, I drive over, I'm the one doing all the work. Have you told them directly how you're feeling? She asked. So I tried that too. I sat Hannah down, this was around year 5, and I said, "Han, I need you to know that I'm struggling. I'm lonely, I miss Jennifer and I miss my family, and I feel like I'm invisible." Hannah looked at me with genuine, warm, completely useless sympathy and said, "Oh, James, you know we love you, we're just all so busy." "You're 40 minutes away," I said. I know, we'll do better." I told Rachel the same thing on the phone one afternoon. "Rach, I need to say something. I feel like I've been putting in all the effort and I don't know what I'm doing wrong and I'm just really—" "James," she interrupted, "I hear you and I love you, but you have to stop being so sensitive. We have lives. Stop being so sensitive. We have lives." I thought about Jennifer's Pinterest board. When we finally go to Italy, I thought about the way she used to reach over in the car and just put her hand on my knee, not saying anything, just there. I thought about how she would have handled this. She always handled everything. And I thought about how she was gone and I was on the phone being told I was too sensitive. I hung up and I sat in the kitchen for a long time. I didn't know it yet, but something in me was done. Year 7. I should skip ahead, but I can't, because year 7 is when Austin asked me for money. $26,000. He'd gotten into some kind of mess with a business venture. I won't go into the details because honestly they don't matter. And he called me and said, "Dad, I need your help. I know I haven't been great about keeping in touch. You think I did not say this, but you've always been there for me and I'm in a really tough spot." He needed $26,000 and he needed it in 2 weeks. And here's the thing that will tell you everything about the kind of man I am, or was at that point in my life. I gave it to him. Every penny. Because he was my son and I loved him, and Jennifer would have wanted me to. And because I was still 7 years in, still the kind of fool who thought that maybe this would be the thing that brought us back together. Maybe this gesture would crack open whatever shell had grown around my family and let some light in. Austin paid me back. I'll give him that. 2 years later, in irregular installments, he paid back all $26,000. But in those 2 years, the calls were regular. He came to dinner. He called on my birthday. Twice. The minute the debt was cleared, the phone went quiet again. I'm not saying he did it consciously. I'm saying it doesn't matter whether it was conscious. Year 8. Year 9. I turned 67 on a Sunday, and I cooked a birthday dinner for myself, and called my children and my sisters, and not one of them came. Brooke sent a card. Hannah texted. Rachel called for 4 minutes and spent 2 of those minutes complaining about her neighbor's fence. Austin sent a gif of a birthday cake. I sat at a table with 6 place settings, because old habits, because hope is the most embarrassing thing about me. And I ate pot roast alone on my 67th birthday. And I thought, Jennifer, what do? I didn't hear anything back. She's been gone 10 years. She doesn't answer anymore. But I waited the way you wait when you already know the answer and you're just not ready to admit it. Then I ate my pot roast. Then I got up and I did the dishes. And then, slowly over the next several weeks, the way a decision gathers force before it breaks the surface, I made up my mind. I didn't tell anyone. That was the first and most important rule. I called a realtor, not a local one, a woman from a firm 3 towns over. And I had my house assessed. Jennifer's house. Our house. The house where we raised Brooke and Austin. Where I had hosted 10 years of unanswered Sunday dinners. Where the freezer was full of frozen optimism. Assessed at $430,000. I said, list it. She looked at me the way people look at someone who's about to do something they might regret. Do you want to take some time to think about it? I've had 10 years, I said. List it. It sold in 3 weeks. Cash offer. The buyers were a young couple, 30s, a dog, a baby on the way. They wanted to close fast. I said, works for me. While the house was in escrow, I started making the other moves. I had a financial advisor, had past tense, who managed my retirement accounts. I pulled everything into accounts that were harder to trace. Not because I was hiding assets. I wasn't doing anything illegal, but because I was about to become someone who didn't want to be found. And I had learned from a decade of practice that the only way to truly disappear is to make it inconvenient for people to look. I canceled my cell phone number. Got a new one. Didn't give it to anyone. I closed my social media accounts. I know. A man in his late 60s with social media, but Jennifer had set them up and I'd kept them running because it felt like turning them off was another small death. Another light going out. I turned them off. I found an apartment. Not in the city. Not in any of the towns my family lived near. A small place, 2 bedrooms, one of which I turned into a study, in a town 3 hours away, near a lake, the kind of town where people move when they want to be left alone, and everyone understands that about each other. I packed what mattered, which, it turns out, isn't much. Jennifer's photographs, her grandmother's quilt, the cast-iron skillet that had been in her family since before I knew her, my books, my clothes. I left behind the furniture. I left behind the Sunday dinner table with the 6 place settings. I left behind the freezer full of food. On the last day, I walked through every room. I stood in the kitchen a long time. Then I locked the front door, put the key in an envelope for the realtor, and drove away. I didn't leave a note. The town is called Millhaven. I didn't choose it for the name, but I can see why someone might have, because there is something about it that feels like exactly the right place to have a mill, to grind things down and start over. It sits on the edge of a lake that's big enough to disappear on, but small enough that the locals all know each other. I didn't know anyone. That was the point. I rented my apartment. I unpacked my books. I hung Jennifer's photographs. I put the cast iron skillet on the stove where it belonged. I slept for 11 hours the first night, which if you've spent 10 years waking up at 3 in the morning, with that particular species of loneliness that lives in a house full of memories, you understand is basically a miracle. The first week was strange. I kept reaching for my old phone. I kept almost calling people who didn't call me back. Old muscle memory is hard to break, and the muscle I'd spent a decade developing was the muscle for waiting, for hoping, for turning toward people who had already turned away. But I didn't call. I went for walks instead, around the lake, mostly. Millhaven has a trail that goes the full circumference, 6.5 miles if you do the whole thing. And I started doing the whole thing every morning. Just me and the water and the sound of geese being rude to each other, which I found deeply comforting. I cooked. Of course I cooked. But now I cooked for one, which sounds sad and maybe is a little sad. But there's also something clean about it. Making exactly what you want. Eating it when you want. Not packaging half of it into containers for people who aren't coming. I found a bookstore. Small place run by a man named, well, I won't use his name, but he had strong opinions about Cormac McCarthy and was right about all of them. I started going in on Tuesday mornings. We argued about books. It was the best part of my week. A month passed. 6 weeks. Then Hannah called my old number and it was disconnected. I know this because Brooke called the house landline, which I had also canceled, and then apparently called Rachel, and then apparently all four of them compared notes and realized that nobody had actually spoken to me in a while, and that while none of them could say exactly how long it had been, they were reasonably certain I had not fallen off the face of the earth. I was wrong about that last part. Brooke was the first one to actually make an effort. I'll give her credit for that. She drove to the house, my old house, the sold house, and found strangers living in it. A young woman answered the door with a baby on her hip, and Brooke apparently stood on the porch for a full 30 seconds in silence before she said, "I'm sorry, my father used to live here." And the woman said, "Oh, we bought it about 6 weeks ago." Brooke called Austin. Austin called Rachel. Rachel called Hannah. And apparently I am reconstructing this from things I learned much later. The four of them had a very long, very panicked conversation in which each of them was quietly, privately asking themselves the same question, which was, when did I last actually talk to him? The answers, I'm told, were not flattering. Austin tried to file a missing persons report. The police declined because I was a 67-year-old man with no signs of foul play, who had sold his house and closed his accounts, and this is what adults who do not want to be found sometimes do. "He's not missing," the officer apparently told Austin. He left. Austin did not by all accounts receive this well. Hannah hired a person, a private investigator type, though I learned later he was more of a general purpose finder of things, to locate me. This took him about 3 months. I was not particularly hidden. I'd used my real name on the lease, my real name on the library card I got in Millhaven, my real name on the membership at the little gym by the lake. I just hadn't told anyone where I was. There's a difference, and it turned out to be a surprisingly large one. The finder found me in the spring, about 8 months after I'd left. I came back from my morning walk to find a car parked outside my apartment building that I didn't recognize. Sitting on the steps was my daughter Brooke. She'd been crying, or about to. It was one of those faces where the infrastructure of crying is fully in place and it's just a matter of time. "Dad," she said. "Brooke," I said, "we didn't know where you were. I thought about 11 phone calls in 12 months. I thought about the birthday dinner. I thought about, we have lives and you're too sensitive and rain check and a gif of a birthday cake." "I know," I said. "That's sort of the point." She started crying then. Full deployment. "How could you do this? We were terrified. We thought something had happened to you." "Austin, Dad, Austin has barely slept." I sat down on the step next to her. I didn't put my arm around her. I wanted to, because she was my daughter and she was crying. But I also thought that this moment deserved to not be softened. "Brooke, when is my birthday?" She stopped. "What? My birthday? What's the date?" "Dad, that's not—" "What's the date?" A pause. "September 12th? The 19th. It's September 19th. I've had the same birthday for 67 years. She wiped her eyes. She didn't say anything. "How many times have you called me in the last year?" "Dad, I'm not asking to be cruel. I'm asking because I want you to know that I know the answer." I counted. Another long pause. "I don't know," she said quietly. 4, and 2 of those were accidental. The lake was very quiet, geese somewhere in the distance. "I kept cooking," I said, "every Sunday. For 10 years. I set a table. I made food. I drove to your house and sat in the driveway because I was too embarrassed to knock on my own daughter's door uninvited. I told Hannah I was lonely. I told Rachel I was struggling. I gave Austin $26,000 and watched him come around until the debt was paid and then disappear again. Brooke was very still. Your mother died, and you all moved on. And I understand that. Life moves on. I understand that. I'm not a child. But I didn't disappear. I was right there, making pot roast, answering when you called, and you just stopped calling. Dad, I'm sorry. I know you are. Right now you are. Because I'm not where you expected me to be." I said it gently, but I said it. She looked at me for a long moment. She had Jennifer's eyes. They all had Jennifer's eyes, the shape of them. And it was both the easiest and hardest thing about looking at my children. "So what now?" she asked. "Now I live here," I said. "This is where I live. You're not coming back?" "Back to what, Brooke?" She didn't have an answer for that. Neither did I. So I went inside, made coffee for one, and let her drive back the way she came. If you've made it this far, first of all, thank you. You're officially one of the good ones. Drop a comment and tell us where in the world you're watching from. We genuinely love knowing. And if you enjoyed this, a like, share, and subscribe costs you nothing but means everything to us. They all came, eventually. Of course they did. That's what people do when the thing they ignored suddenly stops being available. You don't miss the water until the well is dry. And you definitely don't miss your father until your father has apparently ceased to exist. Hannah showed up 2 weeks after Brooke. I saw her car from the window, that same white SUV she'd been driving since forever. And I stood there for a moment, coffee in hand, watching her sit in the lot working up the nerve to come up. She rang the buzzer. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. I let her in. I'm not a monster. She sat at my kitchen table and looked around at the apartment. The photographs, the quilt, the skillet, and she had this expression on her face like she was expecting to find me surrounded by empty bottles in despair. Instead, she found a clean kitchen, fresh coffee, and a man who had slept 8 hours the night before. You seem, she started. Fine, I said. I seem fine. James, I need you to understand how scared we were. Hannah. I set my mug down. How many times did you call me last year? She blinked. I what? Last year, before I left. How many times did you pick up a phone and dial my number? She opened her mouth, closed it. I'll help you. 3, you called me 3 times in 12 months. You live 40 minutes away. You called me 3 times. James, I know. I was busy. I know. You were busy for 10 years, Hannah. You were busy every Sunday I called. You were busy when I told you I was lonely and you said we'll do better, and then did not, in fact, do better. The kitchen was very quiet. I'm sorry, she said, and she meant it. I could see that she meant it. Hannah has never been a dishonest person. She was sorry, genuinely deeply sorry. It just didn't move me the way it would have moved me once. I know you are, I said. Are you going to forgive us? I looked at her, looked at the photograph of Jennifer on the shelf behind her, thought about 11 phone calls, thought about a birthday dinner I cooked and ate alone, 6 place settings, pot roast going cold in an empty house. No, I said. Hannah stared at me. No, no. James, we're your family. You were. I picked up my mug. You had 10 years to be my family, Hannah. You had 10 years of Sundays and birthdays and phone calls and holidays. You had 10 years of me right there, in the same house, waiting. And you were busy. She was crying now, properly crying. I handed her a napkin because I'm not cruel. But I didn't take it back. I love you, I said. I'll always love you. But love isn't the same thing as access. You don't get to ignore someone for a decade, and then show up crying and collect forgiveness like it's a package you forgot to pick up. That's not how it works. So that's it? You're just done with us? I didn't end anything, Hannah. I just stopped pretending something was still alive that you'd already let die. She left an hour later. She cried the whole drive home, according to Brooke, who called me that evening. I know because Brooke called me, actually called me no speakerphone, intentional, and said, Dad, Hannah is really upset. I know, I said. What did you say to her? The truth. A pause. Are you going to talk to any of us again? Brooke, you're talking to me right now. You know what I mean. I did know what she meant. She meant, are you going to let us back in? Are you going to eventually soften? Is this a phase, a dramatic gesture, a negotiating tactic? Is there a path back to Sunday dinners and Christmas mornings, and the version of Dad who kept cooking for people who didn't come? I'm not angry, I told her honestly. I want you to understand that. I'm not sitting here stewing. I'm not plotting. I'm genuinely, completely fine. That's almost scarier, she said quietly. Yeah, I said. I know. Rachel called. I answered because I'm the bigger person, and because I was curious what she would say. What she said was, James, I think you're being incredibly selfish. I laughed. A real laugh, the kind that comes up from somewhere you didn't expect. Rachel, I said, that is the most Rachel thing you have ever said to me. I'm serious. We're your family. You can't just erase us because you're upset. I'm not upset. You clearly are. Rachel, you told me I was too sensitive. You told me to stop being so sensitive. 2 years after Jennifer died, when I called you and told you I was struggling, you told me we all have lives and I needed to stop being so sensitive. Do you remember that? Silence. I remember, she said finally, quieter. I took that advice. I stopped being sensitive about it. I stopped feeling things about it. And then I left. So in a way, this is your doing. Another silence. That's not fair, she said. No, I agreed. It really isn't. I let that sit there between us for a moment. Then I said, Goodbye, Rachel. And I meant it in the complete definitive sense. And I hung up. Austin was last. I knew he was coming before he got there because Brooke warned me, and because Austin has never in his life done anything quietly. He drove 3 hours on a Sunday, and he stood at my door, and he had my camping gear from 2019 in a bag, and red eyes and the particular expression of a man who has been up most of the night rehearsing a speech. I looked at him for a long moment. He looked terrible, genuinely terrible. Unshaven, dark circles, the works. Good, said a small, cold part of me that I'm not proud of, but I'm also not going to pretend doesn't exist. Dad, he said. Austin, I brought your camping gear. I see that. Can I come in? He set the bag down and stood in my kitchen and looked at Jennifer's photographs, and I watched something move across his face that I recognized because I'd felt it myself. The specific pain of realizing exactly what you had, and exactly when you stopped paying attention to it. Dad, I know I have no right to ask you for anything, he started. That's correct. And I know sorry isn't enough. Also correct. But I need you to know that his voice cracked, held. I missed Mom. And every time I looked at you, I saw her and I couldn't handle it, so I stopped looking. And I know that's not an excuse. I know it's the worst possible reason. He stopped. His jaw was tight. I kept not calling, he said, because calling meant facing what we lost, and I wasn't ready to face it. And then one day I looked up, and it had been months, and then more months, and I told myself I'd deal with it later, and later kept not coming. And Dad, I swear to God I didn't realize how bad it was until you were gone and there was a stranger living in our house. He was crying now. Austin, who I had not seen cry since Jennifer's funeral. And here is the thing about being someone's father. It never stops being the hardest thing in the world to watch your child suffer. Even when that child is 26, even when he earned every tear, even when you're the reason he's standing there with a broken face in a strange kitchen 3 hours from home, something in you wants to fix it. Something in you reaches for the version of yourself that could make this better. I let that part speak for just a moment. Sit down, I said. I'll make coffee. He sat. I made coffee. I set a mug in front of him and sat across the table and looked at my son. Really looked at him the way you look at someone when you're deciding something. And I said, I believe you. I believe every word of it. You were scared, and you ran, and you kept running, and you told yourself tomorrow, and tomorrow became 10 years, and you didn't realize what you were doing until it was done. I believe all of that. He nodded, hopeful, eyes still wet. And it doesn't change anything. The hope drained out of his face. Dad, Austin, I gave you $26,000. I gave it to you because you're my son, and I loved you, and I genuinely thought that it would bring us back together. And it did, for exactly as long as the debt existed. The day you made the last payment, you disappeared again. You think I don't know that? You think I didn't count the days? He said nothing. I spent 10 years making myself available to 4 people who treated my availability like a guarantee. Like I'd always be there. Like the pot roast would always be on the stove and the phone would always get answered and Dad would always be waiting in that house with 6 plates on the table. I stood up, walked to the window. The lake was flat and silver in the morning light. I'm not angry at you, I said. That's the part I need you to really hear. I am genuinely not angry. Anger would mean I'm still invested in what you do next. I'm not. I've just moved on. The way you all moved on after your mother died. Turns out it's actually pretty easy once you commit to it. He sat with that for a long time. The coffee steamed between us. So there's nothing, he said finally. No way back. There's a way forward, I said. But forward looks like 2 people who share a history and send a card at Christmas and maybe have dinner once a year somewhere neutral. It doesn't look like Sunday pot roast and family holidays and a father waiting by the phone. That version of me is retired. That's not a father, Austin said. That's a stranger. Yeah, I said. It is. Welcome to how I felt for 10 years. He left before noon. He didn't take the camping gear. I put it in the storage closet, and I have not thought about it since. Here is what I want you to understand about what I did. It was not an accident. It was not a breakdown. It was not an old man losing his grip on reality or making a desperate bid for attention. I was clear-eyed, methodical, and completely at peace with every step of it. I gave them 10 years. 10 years of evidence that I was still here. 10 years of reaching toward people who were always just a little too busy, a little too far away, a little too caught up in their own lives to reach back. I gave them warnings. I'm lonely. I'm struggling. I need my family, and was told I was too sensitive. I gave them money. I gave them Sundays. I gave them a father who sat alone at a birthday dinner with 6 plates and still set 6 plates, because hope is a hard habit to kill. But I killed it. And here is the dirty secret of the whole thing. The part nobody tells you about the dramatic exit and the new life and the cold conversations at the kitchen table. I don't miss them. Not the way I expected to. Not the way I missed Jennifer, which was a missing so total it had its own weather system. I thought I would miss Hannah and Rachel and Brooke and Austin the way you miss a limb. Phantom pain, constant awareness of the absence. Instead, I found that what I'd actually been missing for 10 years wasn't them. It was the idea of them. The family I kept trying to conjure through pot roast and phone calls and hope. The family we were when Jennifer was alive and the house was full and nobody had to be invited because showing up was just what we did. That family ended when Jennifer died. I just took 10 years to accept the death notice. Now I walk 6 miles every morning around a lake that doesn't ask anything of me. I argue about books on Tuesday mornings with a man who is slowly becoming the best friend I've had in 30 years. I cook well and eat well and sleep well and wake up without the particular 3 a.m. dread that comes from waiting for people who don't call. My phone is quiet. I made it quiet. And every single morning when I come back from that walk, and I make my coffee, and I sit in my kitchen with Jennifer's photographs on the shelf, and the lake glittering through the window, I think about those 10 years. The Sundays. The frozen containers. The 6 plates. And then, I think, not anymore. And I drink my coffee. And it is the best cup of coffee I have ever had. Jennifer, if you're watching, and I've decided to believe you are, because the alternative is too quiet, I need you to know that I finally did it. I finally stopped setting the table for people who weren't coming. I know you would tell me to forgive them. You were always better than me that way. You were the one who called back even when you didn't want to, who showed up even when you were exhausted, who kept the family stitched together with sheer stubbornness and love and pot roast. But you're not here, Jen. And without you, it turns out, neither am I. Not the version of me that waited. Not the version that called. Not the version that sat alone on his birthday with 6 place settings and genuine hope. That man went to Italy. I booked the ticket 3 weeks after Austin left. Florence first, then Rome, then south along the coast until I run out of road. I'm going to eat in places where I don't speak the language, and drink wine in the afternoon and sit at outdoor tables and watch strangers live their lives. I'm going to eat the best meal of my life somewhere you never got to see, and I'm going to raise a glass, alone, to you, not to the family, just to you. The only one who ever made me feel like showing up was worth it. I'm here for both of us, Jen. Finally. James Richardson lives in Millhaven. He walks every morning. He doesn't set extra plates. He does not wait. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories.